Hi, good morning, everyone. We are the Group 6, and in today's reporting, you all are going to learn about the first and second step of the step-by-step development of the IEP. But before we head on to the first step, what is an IEP? The Individualized Education Plan is a written plan that describes and guides. And this is the specific services and support your child needs and the school provides. So, what exactly is in an IEP? So, in an IEP, it has the evaluations of the student, a statement of eligibility based on those 13 categories that the student qualifies under. There are due dates for those evaluations, and when the annual review is to be conducted, we have here PLAF, which is what we are going to talk more about later on. And this PLAF is really important. It's so important that the present level is evident because this is what drives the goals, the scheduling of services, the placement in least restrictive environment where the student is going to be serviced, whether it's in gen ed setting or special ed room. We also have the state assessment accommodations and any other services that might the student qualify for, such as speech, OT, PT, etc. And now for the first step of the step-by-step development of the IEP is to formulate a statement of the student's present level of academic achievement of functional performance. So in the very first step, the existing evaluation data on the student are relatively necessary. Why? Because the IEP team reviews them all, including information as well as the concerns shared by the parents of the student. So when we say information, we are talking about the pertinent data. These include information provided by parents, progress toward desired outcomes for adult life, current classroom-based assessments, the most relevant reevaluation, the input from the student's special and general education teachers and services providers, and as appropriate, the results of the student's performance on the statewide and district-wide assessments. So these results are then summarized to describe the student's present level of performance and educational needs. Now, before we head on to the guidelines in developing the statement of the student's present level of academic achievement and functional performance, let us first understand the PLAF. So, PLAF is a statement of the student's present level of academic achievement of functional performance. So this include based on current information from variety of sources and spotlights the area of need, whether academic or functional. It describes current performance in measurable terms, provides baseline data to measure progress and starting place of instruction, and it focuses on the instructional support. The PLAF in the area of need include how a student's disability affects his or her involvement and progress in the general education curriculum. That is the same curriculum as for students without disabilities. And for preschool students, present levels of performance describe how the disability affects the student's participation in age-appropriate activities. Appropriate activities here in this context refers to age-relevant developmental abilities or milestones that typically developing students of the same age would be performing or would have achieved. Now, where do we find the areas of need? So, aside from the aforementioned pertinent data, we can find it from the parent concerns, the strength of the student, the strengths rather, such as their interests, their preferences, academic and multiple intelligence. And lastly, the results of evaluation, such as the standardized achievement test, the criterion reference test, diagnostic test, and or any other tests, and any combination of the above. Actually, guys, the standardized test scores by themselves are not helpful in developing present levels of performance for the IEP because they do not provide material that is relevant to the regular classroom and specific enough to develop annual goals and short-term objectives. If, however, a team feels it is necessary to include test scores in describing a student's present level of educational performance, they should make sure that the results are self-explanatory or explained and ensure that the impact of the disability on the student's performance is stated. So, aside from the standardized achievement test, why is it that the results of statewide based and district based can be considered in developing present levels of performance? Well, this is because there should be a clear link between these assessment and standard based classroom instruction. They also should be coupled with day-to-day instructional and assessment information from the classroom, as well as other sources of information. So the purpose of using such assessments is to determine the student's present level of educational performance and areas of need arising from the student's disability, so that approaches for ensuring the student's involvement and progress in the general curriculum and any needed adaptations or modifications to that curriculum can be identified. Finally, for the guidelines that should be followed in developing the statement of the present level of academic achievement of functional performance, or what we call PLAF, are first, we have here statements should be written in easy to understand language that is free of educational jargon. Next is that information must be current. Next, statements should reflect the results of the assessment data. Statements that relate scores to the student's level of functioning should accompany test scores. So raw test scores are not sufficient. Then lastly, there should be a direct relation between the present level of academic achievement of functional performance and the other components of the IEP. Thus, if the statement describes a problem with a student's reading, the reading problem should be addressed under both the goals and objectives of the specific special education and related services to be provided. All in all, to make it more deep yet easy to understand, what does the PLAF have? So you need to know the student needs and how do these needs affect that student progress in a general education setting. Find out the baseline, where is the student currently performing, and how can we create goals to ensure he is moving towards meeting those general education objectives. In summary, formulating PLAF, first it should be related to an area of need. Next, describe performance in the general curriculum. Next, describe what the student does and needs to be able to do. Next, be written in objective, measurable terms. And lastly, omit task scores unless they are self-explanatory. So yeah, that's it for the first step of the step-by-step development of the IEP. Now I'll give the screen to Ms. Kimberly Plania for the second step.
So we are done with step 1, which is to formulate a statement of the student's present level of academic achievement of functional performance. Now, let us move on to step 2, which is to determine the 4 need areas. In step 2, there are 4 need areas in the development of the IEP. The following areas must be considered in reporting a student's present levels of performance and individual needs. The first one is a student's academic and educational achievement and learning characteristics. These includes the student's current level of knowledge and development in subject and skills areas, including as appropriate. So this means that in formulation of the IEP, those involved should know the level of knowledge of the student and the student's development or improvement in different subject and skill areas. Activities of daily living should also be considered, like is the student capable in personal care, preparing meals, household activities, and managing resources. Under this need area, the student's level of intellectual functioning should also be taken into consideration, like the student's general intelligence, attention, memory, problem-solving ability, and language functioning. Then, the adaptive behavior of students, or the effectiveness with which the individual copes with the natural and social demands of his or her environment, and how the students make judgment and decision. The next one is the expected rate of progress in acquiring skills and information, or the pace at which a student learns new information or skills, in consideration of factors such as these, associated with a student's level of cognitive skills, interest, age, and history of rate of progress. The last one under the academic and educational achievement and learning characteristic is a student's learning style, or how the student learns best. Is it through visual or auditory modalities? It is through hands-on approach, or is it through cooperative learning or repetition of lessons? So the next need area is a child's social development, or the degree and the quality of the student's relationship with peers and adults, or how the student interacts with peers at school, teachers, parents, and members of the household. The next one is a degree of the student's feeling about him or herself, or how the child feels towards oneself, and how the child sees him or herself. Then, the child's quality of social adjustment to school and community environment, or the degree in which the child already adjusted to the school, and how the child interacts and adjusts to the community the child is part of. The next one is the child's physical development, like the child's motor and sensory development, which is a gradual process by which a child gains use and coordination of the large muscles of the legs, trunk, and arms, and the smaller muscles of the hand. The child's health, as well as the vitality, which refers to the physical, mental, and emotional strength of the child, and lastly, the child's physical skills or limitations that pertain to the learning process. So in this area, one should consider the limitation of the physical skills of the child as he or she learns in the classroom. So the last need area is the child's management needs. The first one is environmental modification. In this area, one needs to consider if consistent room arrangement, providing materials and routine, having rules written and displayed, or if limiting the number of items on the student's desk is required to enable the student to benefit from instruction. Then, the student's human resources, or determining whether a paraprofessional is needed to assist the student to locate classes and follow schedules. The last one is the child's material resources, which is to determine if ever the child needs two sets of books, one for school and one at home, and also if a large print in printing the book is needed for the child. So that is all about the four needs areas, which is the step 2 of the development of the IEP. So before I give the floor to Ayuna to give us the examples, let us first recap the different four need areas we discussed. So the first one is a student's academic and educational achievement and learning characteristics. Then, the social development of the child, the physical development, and the child's management needs. So the following four need areas must be considered in reporting a student's present levels of performance and individual needs. Now, to further understand about the topic, let me give the floor to Ayuna to give us the examples.
So what Kim discussed are the tips on how to determine the fourth area of needs, while the examples that I will give are the things or situations that you need to consider in those areas when developing an IEP. But before we will go on with social, physical development, and management needs, we will talk about the other areas of development and needs first. The first example is under the present levels of performance and individual needs. This is the current functioning and individual needs in consideration of the result of the initial or the most recent evaluation, the student's strengths, the concerns of the parents, the result of the student's performance on any state or district-wide assessment programs. These can also be the student's needs related to communication, to behavior, or if the student is visually impaired, use of braille, or other assistive technology, and lastly, the limited English proficiency for the language. If it is in an inclusion class, how the students with disability affects involvement and progress in the general curriculum. And lastly, the students' need as they relate to transition from school to activities when schooling ends. So the next one is the transcript information. This is for the secondary students only. So the transcript information includes first the diploma or the credits earned, second the commencement level state test passed from the subjects biology, earth science, mathematics, or global history, and lastly the expected date of high school completion. So the next one is academic and educational achievement and learning characteristics. The current levels of knowledge and development in subject and skill areas, including activities of daily living, level of intellectual functioning, and adaptive behavior, expected rate of progress in acquiring skills and information in learning style. So under this, we have the strengths, the written expression, the mathematical skill, the organizational skill, the memory and attention, and lastly, the vocational evaluation that the teacher needs to consider in developing an IEP. So first, we will talk about the strengths. So a situation under strength is, for example, the current achievement testing shows that student A has maintained appropriate grade level reading skills. So the achievement testing shows that the strength of student A is reading only. So student A may lack in other skills like in writing or in mathematics skills. In written expression, in this area of development, you need to consider that in testing and classroom assignments, it indicates difficulties with written expression. So when a student have problem with written expression, he or she will sometimes have difficulties that will result in a slow progress and learning. So, like example, for student A, it takes him or her and twice the average of time in completing an activity rather than his or her peers. In mathematical skills, the situation is that a student has a difficulty in a problem solving activity that involved multiple steps. Like, for example, equations that involve 3 or more steps. So, with that, the teacher needs to think of ideas for the development of the student in that area. Next is when the student relies on following the action of his peers but has a difficulty in following teacher's direction independently, especially if it involves more than three steps or three things to follow. So this shows that the student needs development rather in his or her organization skill. Next is memory and attention. When a student shows that he or she has a difficulty in remembering homework assignments and what books to bring to class, or the class schedule and the combination to his locker. For example, if the school has a locker. So as a result, the student missed an average of 2 classes per week, and over 30-day period, he failed to complete 50% of his assignments. So that situation shows that the student has a difficulty or needs development in his memory and attention. Next is communication. So when a student has a difficulty in participating in oral discussion in the classroom, especially when new materials is being taught and the student is having difficulty expressing new information. So that clearly shows that when in terms of communication, the student lacks confidence in that area. So the teacher needs to think of kind of ways to develop that kind of problem of the student, how to boost his or her communication skill. The last one is a vocational evaluation. So in here, if the student shows interest in inventories, show preferences for work in agriculture, in building, repairing, and working outdoors. Highest interest course where in working with plants and animals and tools and equipment. His assessed interest match his expresses vocational interest. So those things are under vocational, and it's up to the teacher on how he or she will evaluate that skill of the student. So those are the things under academic and educational achievements and learning characteristics that the teacher needs to consider in developing the needs of the students. Now we'll go on with social development. So in here, the degree and quality of the students' relationships with peers and adults, feeling about the self and social adjustment to school and community environment. So for example, when a student shows that he or she has a difficulty in participating in team sports like an intramurals inside the classroom, and that student becomes very, very nervous when put in a very competitive situation. So that shows that the student has a problem in his or her social development with the people inside the school or with the other team. So next is the physical development. The quality of the student's motor and sensory development, health, vitality, and physical skills or limitations that pertain to the learning process. So for example, when a student experiences frequent fatigue throughout the day, especially after physical activities or periods of physical activities, so that situation shows that the student needs some development on his or her health. And other situation is that the hearing of that student is within normal limits. So that situation shows that the student has a problem in his or her sensory. So the teacher needs to think of ways on how to develop the physical development of the student. So the last one is a management need. It is the nature and degree to which environmental modifications and human or material resources are required to enable the students to benefit from instruction. So management needs are determined in accordance with the factors identified in the areas of academic and educational achievement and learning characteristics, social development, and physical development. So that would be all for our report about the step-by-step development of the IEP. Thank you so much for listening. Bye!